So the last class we have seen the problem based on root locus. Again, one more example I'm going to discuss now. So that is already I have given you example. Sketch the root locus of the system whose open loop transfer function is g of s is equal to k by s into s plus 2 into s plus 2. Okay. So this was the open loop transfer function given, and find, this is the first step, and second step is we have to find out the k value so that the damping ratio is 0.5. For the closed loop system is 0.5. Theta for the closed loop system is 0.5. We have to fix zeta. That means the damping ratio must be 0.5 such that we have to design k value. We have to adjust k value since in root locus k is ranging from 0 to infinity. As k increases from 0 to infinity, the root locus branches moves gradually. Okay, maybe towards left or right side, whatever it may be, it moves on the S plane. Okay, at a particular value of k, so you'll have zeta value 0.5 at different locations on the root locus. So we'll have different zeta values and also k values. Okay, we have to design a system such that its damping ratio must be 0.5. That means we have to fix k value such that its zeta value is 0.5. Okay, first step we have to draw the root locus. So root locus means, any doubts regarding root locus? If you have any doubts, you can raise. In the previous example. Okay, let us continue this example. Okay, first step we have to find out the open loop poles and open loop zeros. In this case, because the denominator polynomial is having s is equal to only it is having denominator polynomial, there is no zeros in the numerator. So simply calculate the roots. So s is equal to 0, 1 root, s is equal to -2, s is equal to -3. Okay, so that is our first step. So this is our s plane. Okay, at s is equal to 0, 1 4, -1, -2, -3, -4. If we fix like this, at s is equal to -2, 1 more pole. At s is equal to -4, we have 1 more pole. So this is s is equal to -2, s is equal to 0, s is equal to -4. The first step we have to find out the number of poles. Sorry, this is not the j omega axis. This is real axis. Okay, all the 3 poles. Now, the second step, whether the root locus is present on imaginary real axis or not. For that, we have to take a test point. So if we take a test point here, okay, the total number of poles and zeros on the right half of this test pole, that is only 1 pole is there. It is an odd number. Okay, that means this test pole is on root locus. Again, if we take one more test point on this real axis, so if we observe the total poles and total number of poles and zeros on the right side of this is test poles. Okay, test points. P1 point. So root locus is present. P1 is present on root locus, whereas P2, if we observe even number, so even number indicates that this test point is not on root locus. That implies the root locus branch exists between these 2 poles only. Okay. Again, if we take one more test point on this side, again the total number of poles and zeros are 3. It is an odd number. That means this test point is on root locus. That means our root locus branch is again on this side. So root locus is in between these 2 poles, and again on this left side of this pole. Is it clear? Just try to understand this one. Our aim is to find out whether the root locus exists on a real axis or not. Okay. For that, we have taken a test point in between these two and count the total number of poles and zeros right to this test point. So if it is an odd number, that test point is present on root locus. That means up to this point, okay. So total number of poles and zeros are odd. If we take one more test point after this pole, that becomes 2 poles. So we can say there is no root locus in between these 2 points. So again, if we take one more test point on this side, total 3 poles. So we can say this test root locus is on left side of this third pole. Okay, so that is the second one. So here it is. To find the root locus on real axis, no need to calculate this one. Simply drawing this one. No need to write all these matters. Okay, just try to understand. Choose a test point on the real axis between S0 and S is equal to 0 and S is equal to -2. To the right of the total, to the right of this point, the total number of real poles and zeros is 1, which is an odd number. Hence, the real axis between S is equal to 0 to -0 and to -2 will be a part of root locus. Okay, so that is for first test point. This is for second test point. This is for third test point. No need to write all this in the examination. Simply try to draw that figure itself. Okay, only we have to find out the first step. Second step is drawing the root locus branch on. Just draw the root locus branch on S-plane. Okay. Next, to find the number of asymptotes and centroids. In this case, total number of poles is 3 poles. N is equal to 3. Where total number of zeros, in this case, there is no 0. So total number of poles, N is equal to 3 poles. Total number of zeros, open loop zeros, that is 0. So number of asymptotes is given by N minus M, that is the formula. So total 3 asymptotes. What is the need of asymptotes? Along this right line asymptotes, root locus reaches to infinity. Okay, for that we have to calculate asymptotes and centroids. Intersection point of the asymptotes are called as centroid. Here, angle of asymptotes can be identified using this formula, that is 180 into 2q plus 1 by N minus M. So N minus M is 3, 180 into, just if we calculate that one and q is equal to 0, you will get plus 60. So at q is equal to 1, you will get, so one more 180. So no need to calculate other two. So simply plus or minus 1 is 60 degrees. So since root locus branch is always symmetrical about the real axis, 1 is 60 degrees means minus 1, the other one is minus 60. 1 is 180 means the other one is minus 180. So no need to find out. Only 50% of the work we have to do. See, other 50%, just by taking the mirror image, you will get the other 50%. Okay. Now, q is equal to 0, we have obtained the angle. So at q is equal to 1, we have obtained one more angle. So at what point we have to start this? That means the root locus, simply the root locus. So this is 60, minus 60, 180 and minus 180. So everything. So we have to find out centroids. Centroid is nothing but intersection point of asymptotes. This is one asymptote, this is another asymptotes, making 60 degrees, minus 60 degrees and 180 degrees. Okay. So we have to find out centroid. Centroid is obtained by simply algebraic sum of The real parts of roots minus real parts of zeros divided by n minus m directly gives the centroids. Okay. So sum of poles minus sum of zeros by n minus m, which is equal to minus 2, becomes the centroid. If we draw the figure. So previously I have indicated with blue line. So that is branch on root locus. Okay, sorry, root locus on real axis. Now this is centroid. At this centroid, I have taken one asymptote with 60 degrees, the other asymptote with minus 60 degrees, the other asymptotes with 180 degrees. Okay, so these are the breaking points. Okay, simply we have to draw at minus 2 using protractor. We can draw these asymptotes, centroids, asymptotes are known. So this is about centroid and asymptotes. Next, we have to draw whether the root locus breaking point is available or not. To find the breakaway point and breaking points, initially, so we have to take the closed loop transfer function. So characteristic equation means 1 plus GH is equal to 0, the denominator polynomial. Okay, no need to represent all this. Simply 1 plus GH is equal to 0 is nothing but our characteristic equation, denominator polynomial of this. Here H is equal to unit feedback system. So simply 1 plus GH is equal to 0. You will get the characteristic equation. And from this characteristic equation, K is equal to S minus S cube minus 6S cube minus S is equal to K. So dk by ds is equal to 0. So if we make, so you will get some S value. S is equal to minus 0.845 and one more S minus 3.154. Okay. Are you able to follow? So what is the need of breakaway point? That means root locus branch always starts at open loop poles. That means at these 3 poles, so root locus branch is moving in this direction on real axis. This root locus branch is moving in this direction. Here the root locus branch is moving away from this point. So when 2 root locus branches are coming in opposite direction, there is a breakaway point. So you will get some breakaway point, and one root locus branch moves upward direction, the other one moves downward direction. That is also given by R into 180 by 10 minus. So number of branches intersecting in this case, that is 2 branches intersecting each other. So here these are the 2 points, and S is equal to 0.845 and S is equal to minus 3.15. So if we observe these values on this real axis, minus 0.85 is in between 0 to minus 2. That means one root locus branch is moving in this direction. The other root locus branch is moving in this direction. So intersection takes place at this particular S value. Okay. So whereas if we observe this minus 3.15 is somewhere here. There is no root locus branches at this point. So we cannot consider this as breakaway points. Okay. Is it clear? Now, so when K is equal to minus 0.45, so if we observe the K value is real and positive value. If we observe that K is equal, S is equal to minus 3.15, the K value is negative value. K value cannot be negative. The gain value is always positive value. So we cannot consider this as breakaway point. Only the first one becomes the breakaway point, minus 0.845. Just by common sense also we can say that is in between 2 root locus branches. So we can say this is correct This is the right breakaway point, whereas this becomes the false one. Okay. Now, the next we have to find out angle of departures and angle of arrivals. In this case, there is no complex poles and no complex zeros. No need to calculate angle of departures and angle of arrivals. When there is a complex poles and zeros, that means in this case, all the three are real. When there is a complex pole, when there is a complex zero, in that case, angle of departures and angle of arrivals. This is nothing but angle of departure, whereas this becomes the angle of arrival. So with reference to positive real axis, we have to consider angle. So this becomes, if we consider in this fashion, so this becomes the angle of departure. So this becomes the angle of arrivals, where the root locus branch starts, okay, reaches, is called as angle of arrivals. Okay, in this case, there is no complex zeros and complex poles. No need to calculate the first fifth step. Now, whether the root locus branches crosses the imaginary axis or not, by using Routh-Hurwitz criteria. Already we have discussed in the last sessions. Okay, Routh-Hurwitz criteria. We can use that Routh-Hurwitz criteria, or this is the second method. So directly by taking the characteristic equation, simply put S is equal to 0 in this. Put S is equal, S is equal to j omega in this. Once if we substitute S is equal to j omega, taking imaginary part equal to 0, you will get omega value. Where same substitute the omega value in equating the real parts equal to 0, you will get k value. That means when the root locus branch, one root locus branch, this is another, these are the three. Okay, one root locus branch is moving in this direction. The other root locus branch is moving in this direction. The other one comes in this direction. Intersecting point is 0.8, and they move away from these 2 points. They crosses imaginary axis because our straight line asymptote is something like this. So it reaches to infinity along the straight line asymptote. So in this fashion, so at k is equal to 48, or omega value is equal to, that means j omega value, this is equal to plus or minus 2.8. That means one root locus branch is moving in this direction, one more asymptote. So this is at this point, it crosses imaginary axis. Okay, so for that we have calculated this k value and omega value. Once we get using RH criteria, we can find out these positions. Okay. Otherwise, the second method is substituting S is equal to j omega and making real part equal to 0 and also imaginary part equal to 0. So if we make imaginary part equal to 0, you will get omega value. If we make real part equal to 0, you will get gain value. Okay. Is it clear? Next, this is the figure. So the same thing, starting point, one more starting point at S is equal to, this is one pole, second pole, and third pole. And this itself is centroid. These are the three asymptotes. Along the straight line asymptotes, the root locus branch moves. Okay. So this is root locus branch. So this root locus branch moves in this direction. Again, this root locus branch moves in this direction. Moves in this direction. Finally intersect at a point which is nothing but breakaway point. Along this straight line asymptote, again at a particular point it crosses imaginary axis. We have already found find that value. So just join these 2 points and move towards infinity along this straight line asymptote. This is moving along the straight line asymptote. Fine, moves to infinity. This completes the root locus, drawing the root locus. So here The scale is 1 centimeter is equal to 0.5 units. They have considered. We can take 1 unit is equal to 1. It is preferably, if we take like that, it is good. 1 centimeter is equal to 1 unit. In that case, you will get more correct values. Okay. So next step is designing. So this is the design part. To find k corresponding to zeta is equal to 0.5. So if we observe the root locus, okay, at this point, at breakaway point, if we calculate zeta is equal to zeta value, it is equals to 1. So if we calculate zeta value at this breakaway point, its value is equals to 1. So nearer to this one, so generally it is over damping case. If we move towards in this fashion, so zeta value, zeta becomes under damped system. That means zeta becomes maybe up to this point. So zeta is less than unit value. So in between this to this part, it is unit value. So if it is more than that, that becomes an unstable system. Okay. So here the zeta value is less than 1. So our aim is to find out zeta is equal to 0.5. So how you will get this zeta? So which is nothing but simply alpha we have to calculate. Alpha is equal to tan inverse of zeta. So for zeta is equal to 0.5, so you will get 60 degrees. Alpha value you will get 60 degrees. So that is simply if we observe in the figure. So this is 60 degrees line. So when zeta is equal to, so just join the line from origin to, so negative real axis here it is minus, this is 60 degrees. Okay, using protractor. So we have to draw a line which cuts the root locus. Okay, root locus implies for zeta is equal to 0.5. The roots must be in this position. So one root, the other one is no need to calculate the other one. Only one thing is sufficient. So when zeta is equal to 0.5, the roots are at this position. Okay. Next step, we have to find out gain value at this particular position. So how to calculate gain? Using magnitude criteria, we can find out gain value. So what is magnitude criteria? So magnitude of g of x of h of s is equal to unit value. So k into, so magnitude of g of s h of s is equal to unit value. So if we calculate the magnitude of g of s h of s, if we want to find out k, so that becomes unit by magnitude of g into h. Okay, so this is nothing but what is g? G is poles, zeros. So if we take the transfer function, open loop transfer, h of s is equal to unit value, no need to consider that one. So only g of s. G of s is nothing but if we represent in pole zero fashion, it is s minus 0, s minus something. Similarly, in denominator poles, first pole, second pole, and so on. Okay, so that implies k is equal to, so 1 by this value. So magnitude of s minus pole 1, s minus pole 2, and so on, divided by s minus zeros 1, s minus z2. No need to note all this. Just simply try to understand how you will get the k value. K value can be identified using magnitude criteria. What is magnitude criteria? Modulus of or magnitude of g of s into h of s is equal to 1. So g of s is equal to k by something. Okay, transfer function. So because h of s is equal to unit value. So implies k is equal to, so reverse this one. So zeros, previously h of s is equal to zeros by poles. Now that becomes poles by zeros and its magnitude. This is S minus P1 indicates that the distance between the first pole to that particular point. Okay. So first one, magnitude of second pole to that particular point. This is the point S. So magnitude of S minus P means distance. Here, this is L1. Distance between these 2 points. Similarly, S minus P2 means distance between these 2 points. Similarly, S minus P3 means distance between these 3 points. Okay. For examples, zeros are also there. One more zero maybe at this position. Okay, again we have to measure the value L4. Okay, distance between these 2 points directly by taking the measurement on graph sheet. We can simply write the values. So one distance 5 centimeters, 4 centimeters, 3 centimeters. Using that scale, we can find out the distance. Okay. If there is no zero, in that case, we have to consider it as unit value. We cannot put it simply as zero, and we can say we cannot say it is equal to infinity. Simply put k is equal to unit value. If we calculate the corresponding k value, that becomes k at the desired damping factor. So it is product of lengths of vectors of all poles to that particular point. Similarly, divided by product of lengths of vectors of all zeros to that particular point. That means we have to, so at a particular point, this is SD. We have already obtained just 60 degrees. This is okay. So zeta value is 0.5. Our aim is to find out k value at this particular location. So draw the lines from remaining poles and zeros, all the poles and zeros. So this is first pole, distance L1, second pole, distance L2, third pole, distance L3. So L1 into L2 into L3. So there is no zeros, so we have to put it as unit value and find out it is approximately k value is equal to. At k is equal to 8, the damping factor is 0.8. Like that, we can design a system for the desired output. Okay, is it clear? If you have any doubts, you can ask. Otherwise, we will go to next chapter. Okay, I think no doubts. So next. Next chapter, that is frequency domain analysis. So still now we have seen the time domain analysis. Time domain analysis or time domain representation means with respect to time, its response. What we have observed is with respect to time, the response of the system. So this is time where C of t its output. If we measure maybe a damped oscillatory or something in this fashion. Okay. Now, in this, the second way of analyzing the system is frequency response analysis. In this case, so this is 2 pi f angular frequency or frequency. So with respect to frequency, we have to observe the response. Observing the response. Switch off your 245. If you have any doubts, you can raise. Otherwise, please switch off your mic. Okay. So with respect to frequency, so we have to find out its magnitude and also the phase angle. Frequency response analysis, if we observe the sinusoidal inputs, if this is the sinusoidal input, there is a great advantage of sinusoids. We can generate sinusoid very easily. And if we take the response for a system, if the input is sinusoidal input, the response at any point, if we observe, the response at any point may be a current value or voltage value in the circuit, that is also a sinusoid, and the frequency is not going to change. The output frequency is also same as input frequency. Okay, so here the frequency is not changing, only the changes may be in amplitude and the phase angle value. If we observe the response, or at any point if we take the measured the values quantities, only the changes takes place either in magnitude or in phase. Okay, so using frequency response analysis or the frequency response curves, we can speak about the stability of the system, whether the system is stable or unstable, okay, or marginally stable. Everything can be analyzed. What we have analyzed in root locus or time domain analysis, so everything can be used, can be analyzed using frequency domain specifications and frequency response curves. Okay, so in time domain analysis, we have fixed some rise time, peak overshoot, settling time, steady state errors, everything what we have learned in time domain analysis. Using these specifications, we have told the system is more stable, the system is less stable, the system is marginally stable. Everything we can speak using in terms of time domain specifications. Similarly, in frequency domain analysis, we have some frequency domain specifications. Using the frequency domain specifications, we can analyze a system. Okay, we'll discuss one by one in this chapter. Just like root locus, root locus method is to analyze in time domain analysis. Okay, time domain analysis. Similarly, there are polar plots, Nyquist plots, Bordeaux plots. Okay, and some more plots are also there. M&N circles, everything. Okay, so these plots are used to analyze the frequency response curves. Okay, so we'll discuss one by one. The first, so we have already discussed the time response analysis of control system and the time domain specifications of second order system. We have derived. Similarly, we have to derive for frequency response analysis. First, we have to discuss the frequency domain specifications and also the definitions for frequency domain specifications, and that we have to derive formulas for second order system, response of second order system. Okay, same parallelly what we have done in time domain, the same thing we have to, same steps we have to follow in frequency domain specifications. Okay, then what is the frequency response? Frequency response means the response of the system when the response of the system can be partitioned into both the transient response and steady state response. We can find out the transient response by using Fourier integrals. Here we can find out the solution using Fourier integrals. The steady state response of the sinusoidal system for a input signal, for a sinusoidal input signal, is known as frequency response. Simply, the steady state response of a system when the input is sinusoidal input. When the input is sinusoidal input, the response is called as frequency response. Okay. In this chapter, we'll focus only on the steady state response. Okay. If a sinusoidal input is applied to a linear time invariant systems. So all the systems till now what we have considered is linear time invariant systems. Okay. Then it produces the steady state output, which is also a sinusoid. So when we apply some sinusoid to any system, linear time invariant system, output is also a sinusoidal. Okay, you will get the sinusoidal response. The input and output sinusoid signal have the same frequency. That is the more beauty of this sinusoidal response. Okay, when the input is having some frequency, output is also having the same frequency. Only the difference is the amplitude and phase. Okay, how to get the sinusoidal transfer function or sinusoidal signal? Simply, if we from the S domain, for example, T of S is a transfer function in S domain, simply substitute S is equal to j omega. T of j omega becomes the sinusoidal transfer function. Replace S with j omega, that becomes sinusoidal transfer function. Okay, transfer function means output by input. Laplace transform of output by Laplace transform of input is called as, assuming initial conditions equal to 0, so it is called transfer function. How to get it? Sinusoidal transfer function. Sinusoidal transfer function, simply sinusoidal output by sinusoidal input. So which is nothing but mathematically, simply by replacing S is equal to j omega, you will get sinusoidal transfer. Okay, just no need to write all this, simply listen. Let the signal be R of t is equal to A into sine omega naught t, the sinusoidal input. This is the sinusoidal input. Sine omega t. A sine omega t, amplitude A, frequency is omega. Okay. The open loop transfer function of the system is equal to g of s. So open loop transfer function is g of s. Its sinusoidal transfer function is simply substituting s is equal to j omega. You will get a sinusoidal transfer function. G of j omega is its sinusoidal transfer function. Sinusoidal transfer function of open loop transfer function. Okay. So we can represent g of j omega in terms of magnitude and phase angle. Once it is a complex number, we can represent its magnitude and as well as phase angle. Simply, this can be A sine omega t plus phi. This can be represented by A at an angle of phi. A is magnitude, phi is phase angle. Okay, simply like that we can represent with A magnitude and its phase angle. At omega is equal to omega naught, the equation becomes at a different frequency, then becomes only the changes is in magnitude and phase angle. Okay, the output means input multiplied with transfer function. Okay, becomes output. C of s is equal to R of s into G of s. Okay, so simply, if we want to find out output, so output, which is nothing but you will get an output simply multiplying the magnitudes and simply adding the phase angles. You will get the final output. Okay, so initially first sine omega t and its transfer function is g of j omega, here A at an angle of 0 or omega naught t. Okay, simply 0. Okay, so we can express the output by multiplying these two magnitudes and adding the phase angles. You will get the sinusoidal output. Is it a simple mathematics? Multiplying two sinusoid functions. Okay. The amplitude of the output sinusoidal signal is obtained by multiplying the amplitudes of the input signal and the magnitude of g of j omega at omega is equal to omega naught. Okay, simply you will get the magnitude. The phase angle of output signal is obtained by adding the phase angle of the input signal and the phase angle of g of j omega at omega is equal to omega. Simply you will get the response. Pictorially, I have represented this one. Just using block, I have represented. If input is equal to a sin omega t plus theta, that can be represented by a at an angle 0 for a transfer function whose output is c of t is equal to b at an angle of phi. Okay. So if we want to find out the total c of t is nothing but input multiplied with transfer function. So input magnitude multiplied with transfer function, you will get magnitude of output. Similarly, input phase angle plus the phase angle of this transfer function, if we add both of these, directly you will get phi. So very simple to find out this transfer. Okay. Now the frequency response. So generally we have to evaluate. We can evaluate the frequency response for open loop transfer function, loop transfer function, and also the closed loop transfer function. Here we have to remember these terms. Terminology is very important. Loop transfer function means g of s into h of s. Open loop transfer function is only g of s. Feedback transfer function means h of s. And the closed loop transfer function means that is g of s by 1 plus g of s into h of s. That is closed loop transfer function. Okay. And characteristic equation means 1 plus g of s into h of s. That becomes the characteristic equation. Denominator polynomial of the closed loop transfer function is called characteristic equation. So closed loop transfer function means m of s. Loop transfer function g of s into h of s. Open loop transfer function is g of s. Okay. So just terminology you have to remember, and these are the advantages of frequency response analysis. That is, time domain is also having some advantages. Similarly, the frequency response analysis also having some advantages. Okay, just note down these advantages and disadvantages.
నేను నేర్పుతా ఫస్ట్ నుంచే.
Okay, we'll do the derivations in the next class. If you have any doubts, you can ask later. Thank you for today's session. Stop here. Sir. 1 to 14.